My background is in cognitive psychology and computer science. Earlier, I used to work on Google Apps, and after that, I was the design lead for Firefox for a few years. So the thing I wanted to talk about here is more like a general thing. It's some high-level principles and some interesting anecdotes and fun things I started running into once I started working in enterprise software, which is a whole world unto itself with its own rules. So hopefully we'll keep it light, quick, and entertaining. I won't be offended if you leave. This has very little to do with SSO and Oktane in general. This was kind of a last-minute presentation we put together, and I thought I would talk a little bit about stuff that I really know in depth, which is not Oktane. So with that, so you've been here how many days now? 3? Yeah, 2 days. Okay. Have any of you heard of Highfive? A few scattered. Yeah. So Highfive is a kind of new generation video conferencing system. It's one of the 3 only companies started after 2006 in the video conferencing space. Our frenemies are Zoom and BlueJeans. So they're kind of those 3 are the new breed of how you do video conferencing using cloud-based communication and with a new kind of approach to this whole space. Specifically, one of the things that Highfive does is it doesn't require any apps. It runs in the web browser using a standard called WebRTC. WebRTC had a lot of buzz like 2-3 years ago. And having built browsers, I was like, well, you're talking about it too early. It's not actually in all the browsers yet, so it's not going to be useful. This is actually the year where all the browsers get SSO support. So when Safari just shipped literally last week, their screen share and video support in Safari. And that includes mobile Safari on your phone. And Microsoft is about to flip the switch to turn Edge into Chromium, essentially. So then they also get a very good WebRTC stack. So what that means is Highfive has a deployed client user base of roughly 4 billion devices out there by that happening. So anyway, I'm going to talk about some guiding principles. Some of these come from video conferencing. But they apply to most enterprise software. I don't know, do any of you actually build enterprise software? Are you mostly in IT and, okay. Oh, let's go. So this was my reaction when I joined enterprise. I was like, is this thing being tested on any humans at all? Because I could not figure out like any of this. It was like baffling to me that this software could be people were using the software and even paying money for it, right? And the good thing is that the industry has come very, very far just in the past, I would say, 5 to 7 years on this. People kind of expect the consumer level usability now. And a lot of the modern startups like Slack and systems that have been built from the ground up to be as friendly as anything that you find on your phone day to day. But I was very baffled, and especially in the video conferencing space, I'm pretty sure the video conferencing space is the butt of many jokes. Every time I watch like Silicon Valley or movies that have video conferencing, they always make fun of the fact that video freezes or audio is dropping out, and the same for conference calls. So to me, that's irresistible. Like this is a problem that still isn't solved, and there's a new batch of companies that are trying to solve this and approach it with the same kind of user-friendliness that FaceTime has on your phone. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that are pretty interesting. So we all know passwords are broken. Like, I don't think any of you have a password that has not been leaked online through one of these breaches, right? Unless you have two-factor authentication or you're extremely good and have a different password on every single website, which nobody, including all the security people I know, are actually capable of. And you can install like 1Password and all these password managers. And you can build this like infrastructure on top of it, right? That's one of the problems that Okta solves, right? Single sign-on, you have 1Password. You can have identity and authentication in one location. However, we at Highfive, we can't rely on people having SSO. Like we have a very, very long tail of people and companies that don't have a centralized solution for this. And we can't just tell them, get that to make sure you're secure. Also, on our side, we don't want to ever be responsible for a leak. Like if anybody should ever be able to get into any of our infrastructure and steal passwords, that's really bad. And I don't want to be responsible for that. So what do? We actually just eliminated the passwords. We have no passwords in our system. And that sounds insane. But you've probably seen variations on this. So our system is innovatively called passwordless login. You see it sometimes if you log into things like Slack, they can send you a link that will log you in. And so where this came from was we did user research on Firefox where we studied, we were actually building a password manager into Firefox. We did a lot of studies around how people actually handle their passwords. Lots of cool stories, like people have small books where they've written down all their passwords. They have Post-it notes everywhere. And most people just use the same password everywhere. And most people can't remember their passwords, right? They go to the site or the service rarely enough that every time they go there, they don't know their password. So we literally had, I think it was 30% of the people we looked at wouldn't even try to type in their password. They just went straight for the reset password link. Like, they were like, there is no way I'm going to remember this. I'm going to ask to get a new password. And then they click that thing in their email. So that sounds absolutely terrible, but it's actually a reasonable approach. And the reason for that is email is your last resort, right? Like, if somebody breaks your email, everything is out the window. You can reset passwords everywhere. You can steal all your accounts. So we have to assume that email is secure. And it has to be, right? Like, and if you get access to that person's email, it doesn't matter how secure our system is because you can just ask for a new password. So the way we do it is the first time you walk up to Highfive, you say, here's my email address. And we check, are you an SSO customer? If so, we send you to Okta. Are you Office 365? In which case, we send you over there. Are you a Google Apps user? We send you over there. If all of those fail, we just send out an email. And we say, click the link in your email, and you're going to be logged in. And another thing we do is kind of the more modern concept of leaving that logged in. So we log you in for a year at a time. And again, going back to the logic that if somebody can walk up to your computer unlocked and have access to your email, and nobody has separate password on their email, at that point, you've lost the game anyway. So we're essentially outsourcing that security to your email, which needs to be secure anyway, and hopefully has two-factor auth. So that was one way we did that. We had roughly 15 to 20% of our support volume every week was, what's my password? We flipped the switch on this and went to 0. No problem. Nobody has problems logging in. So that was quite a happy day for our support team because that is not a fun problem to try to resolve. So the other principle we have is don't try to solve social problems with technology. And what I mean by that is very often, especially in the enterprise space, we try to kind of enforce behavior through some sort of security mechanism. And going back to video conferencing, the classic one there is, you're in a meeting with 4 people and you have to ask for permission to share your screen. Like, why is that a thing? Like, what? You're talking to 4 people. We even know that all those 4 people work at your company by authenticating them. Why do I have to ask my coworker to share my screen? That's absolutely crazy. And why are there passwords and PIN codes and all this stuff everywhere? Like, we have authenticated you. We know where you belong. We've established that you work for the company. And if you don't work for the company, we have a simple security model that just says, then somebody in the company's meeting who you're joining needs to let you in. But this is clearly not about security. So why is this the default behavior? So the other example we use is this straight up analogy. Like, if you have a conference room and I just walk in and you're there, you will say, hey, we actually have a meeting here. Please leave, right? And so we don't have any kind of restriction on a meeting. There are ways to make meetings that are not, you can't join, but that's not the default behavior. And a lot of this is about that. Like, enterprise has a tendency to just take the worst case scenario and make that the default behavior. And that's no good. So finding ways to support, the common pattern of what people do every single day and make that extremely easy. And then you have some specialized edge cases that you can go find and configure if you need that. So, switching tack a little bit over to the cognitive psychology part of my brain. One of the things we did with Highfive, we worked with, I did forget to mention. So Highfive is very hardware-centric compared to a lot of these things. So WebEx and Zoom, they're what's called in the industry web conferencing, which is super misleading because it's actually not on the web. They all have apps you need to download. Well, we'll get to that later. But we essentially set out and we said, we're not going to get the best possible video conferencing in the world unless we control every single part of the stack, including all the way down to the hardware and run our own software on the hardware that is in the room. So we are very room-centric. We consider laptop-to-laptop video conferencing mostly solved. The moment you need to have a room in that meeting, then things get complicated, both acoustically and just like usability-wise, and everything around getting a conference room into a call is extremely complicated. So we partnered as the first video conferencing provider with a company called Dolby, which you probably heard of. They are also across the street here doing lots of like audio cinemas. So they had made this thing that they called the Dolby conference phone, and they were literally trying to sell it as a conference phone. The problem is, in 2017, nobody's buying new conference phones. That doesn't seem like a thing you would be doing. And they actually made this amazing system that captures the entire room. It has what's called spatial audio capture. So it captures in 360 kind of surround sound, although surround sound is something different. But it has a different approach where it just tries to capture the room instead of like using noise cancellation to get rid of unwanted sounds. And you should try it out downstairs, booth G1, we're showing it. And we have some special offers for Okta customers later here. But the thing I wanted to get to here, which is interesting, you have to design for the way human perception works. And has anybody here heard about the cocktail party effect? So it's essentially, if this was a big party and everybody's talking, it's really noisy here, right? And you see it downstairs too in the conference hall. But you can focus in on a person that is like roughly where you're pointing your head, and your brain eliminates the noise out, and you can kind of make sense of what that person is saying. And the similar kind of principle is in play here with the spatial audio. So what happens is when we put that in a conference room and you have like 7 people around the table, all the voices come from different points when you're sitting remotely and listening to what's coming from that room. And the reason that's important is people talk over each other. They have these what's called conversational triads, but 2 people will be talking, a third person will be kind of butting in, like carefully starting a sentence right before the other person ends his or her sentence. And so all these people really talk over each other all the time, and that's what makes it really hard to follow along when you're remote in a video conference that has people in a room. So what this does is it makes those 3 people come from different locations on your end, which means you can parse out who's talking and what they're saying, even if they're talking exactly at the same time, which most of the time they will be doing. So that was one of the things that we weren't willing to compromise on. We wanted to go all the way in on this, and we were Dolby's first partner that turned this former actual voice conference phone into an integral part of a video conferencing offering. The other cool thing about that is that it comes with a touchscreen on the device itself, and we run our software again all the way down to all the devices here, so we can make the simplest possible UI on this now. There's other companies that have started following down that path, and even other partners of Dolby that have started doing this. But we did that about a year before anybody else. So pretty proud of that partnership. If you get the chance to check out how that sounds, it's one of those things. I can stand here and talk all I want about it, but unless you've heard it, you don't get just how much of a difference it makes. So here's another one. Nobody wants to install an application to join your meeting. So, and other solutions solve this by becoming large enough that people already have it installed, but that seems like the wrong solution, especially for a startup like ours, and we want to be on the same footing as WebEx or GoToMeeting or any of these people we're halfway competing with in that space. So we went all in on what's called WebRTC, and a lot of people have this impression that, and this is more for the people in the video conferencing space, but WebRTC, like I said, was the hot new technology 2 to 3 years ago. But until it's deployed across all browsers, it isn't delivering on that promise. 2019 is the year that that promise will actually be delivered. So the way Highfive works, you click a link and you're in the call. There's nothing else to do. You have everything set up. And again, we flip those switches to support those browsers, and we have billions of installed clients for our product. So if you're at all work in this space, WebRTC is super exciting. And the difference between having that kind of seamless, just go here, get everything working with no software install is quite mind-blowing. Combine that with the hardware solution we have. We're also running in AWS, hyperscale cloud. There's no hardware to worry about. There's no like Mac Mini to maintain. So this is a good example of the current state of the industry. And sorry, I'm going to take a little bit of a be mean to one of our competitors here. You can't ship this in 2019. Like, you can't leave the security up to the endpoint of the user, right? You can't say, you have this massive security hole in Zoom that lets anybody control your meeting, and you ship an update that says bug fixes. And when does that update come up? It comes up when you launch Zoom ready to join the meeting. The last thing you want to do then is spend 5 minutes because you're already late for your meeting. So everybody just clicks later. Like, I see this in the field all the time. Like, people open up Zoom, and it always has an update, and it's always later because I don't have time for that. I'm late for my meeting. So this isn't like cloud video conferencing. This is insecure endpoint conferencing. Like, you're literally saying there are millions of clients out there, and tomorrow they are all insecure, and now we need to slowly patch them all up. With WebRTC, you reload the web page, and it works. And if there is a deep, deep security hole, you betcha that Google is already on top of that. So we also have an app. So I'm not like down on apps in general. If you want apps, if you think how Slack does it, where you can open up Slack in a web page, we can also have a dedicated app. But you have to have an updater that is silent, quiet, just gets this done behind the scenes. So we actually use the Chrome updater to update our thing. So you never see us update. It's always just the latest version. Here's the other part of that equation. This is no way to run a conference room. So it's cool that you can do this. The amount of elements involved here is going to lead you down a very dark path of problems. So first off, you have like a computer that is running Mac OS or Windows. That one will need updates all the time. On top of that, you run some device drivers for the camera or the microphone you installed. There's wires everywhere. There's a keyboard attached. There's an iPad that controls the Mac Mini that runs whatever software is hooked up to a TV. Any of these devices can be unplugged. Any of these devices can run out of battery, fall off the network. Like, people will unplug it to recharge their phone. People will unplug the network cable to find the internet because the Wi-Fi isn't working right now. So this is kind of the state of the low end of the industry, which is if you take one of these web conferencing platforms and you say, oh, I want to put it in the room, this is what you end up with. And this came from one of our customers. They were trialing us against some other solutions. So this is not something we, set up to be extra bad or anything. This was literally the box they got when they tried the other solution. And again, you can get it working, but it's very error prone. And if you work in IT, all you want is for stuff to be reliable and be like a fridge. It should be an appliance. You put it in the room, it runs for the next 20 years, and then maybe you buy a new fridge at the end of 20 years. And if you haven't seen our hardware setup, I encourage you to go down to G1 and take a look at it. It literally has two components. It has the thing that hangs on the TV with a camera, and a computer is inside of the camera. And then it has this Dolby unit on the table, and that's it. And we control all the updates. We take care of all the security. It doesn't even need to be inside your network. It can be on a DMZ that is technically outside of your network, and everything still works. And this is another indicator of something going wrong, right? Have you guys seen these? Like, so when we started Highfive, we got requests from customers saying, do you guys have table tents? Do you have anything you can put in the rooms to like teach people how to start a video conference? And we were like, I'm never going to ship that. If that is still a problem, we haven't solved it. Back to the drawing board. So we don't have table tents. That's a feature. But these systems are really complicated. I don't know. I still don't know how WebEx works, but that's probably to my advantage. And this essentially means if you have an important meeting, you have to have IT come in and be in the meeting to make sure nothing goes wrong. And that is the least fun job for any IT manager. How many of you have these in your conference rooms? Okay, that's better than I expected, but still quite a few. Here's another principle we have at Highfive, which is that the concept of a user license on a collaboration tool is actively like hostile to the user. Like you see people share user licenses to save money, and people log in with like, there are some accounts that can be host account that can host meetings, and then they use like free accounts to go in and join as guests. And any collaboration solution that gets more expensive, the more people make use of it. That's very counterintuitive to us. And again, we have the luxury of not having to sell user licenses because we sell hardware. You pay per room per month. It's like a leasing model. It's like having a cable box. And that's how we cover our costs. So we just made everything available. So if you have 20 people today and tomorrow you have 500 people because suddenly private equity swooped in and let you acquire a company or something, it doesn't really change your cost unless you add more rooms. So but this leads to so many dysfunctions in just like how people use software. And again, managing all of that stuff is also not something you want to do. You don't want the 21st person to sign up to that solution to get the message saying, oh yeah, you need to contact your admin to upgrade to the 40-person plan. Or, do I use WebEx enough to justify having a WebEx account? So we just took that off. So no user licenses in Highfive. This one, this kind of goes back to the Dolby partnership. The other thing they do in addition to this conference phone with the spatial capture is they have unbelievable noise cancellation. And that is exactly what you want in video conferencing. If you're joining from a device, you are traveling. You're in an airport, you're in a car, you're on a train. And the difference between having a wideband, 16 kilohertz audio with amazing noise cancellation and calling in via like a PSTN old school 8 kilohertz noisy line with no noise cancellation is night and day. I've literally been in SFO with tons of people around me talking, and people are like, where did you find a quiet spot at SFO? And I'm like, I didn't. So but this is something, if you're looking into this, make sure you do tests how well it performs in these noisy environments, because this is the real world. That the whole reason for having video conferencing and this audio conferencing stuff is so you don't have to get everybody in the same room, and half of them are going to be in environments like this. This is to some people this is a little provocative. So one of the things we do as a principle is what we call proactive administration, right? So the difference between this and other types of admin is more, we will reach out to you and tell you when we know something is wrong. And, I know, mind-blowing, right? But you'd be surprised how many of these solutions are you digging through the logs to figure out what's going on, or downloading a CSV to get some analytics, or stuff like that. So what we do, so one example is if you walk into a room and you unplug one of our units, within a couple of minutes, you have an email as an IT admin that says, somebody unplugged that room is now broken. We let you define VIPs in your company, so you can say, everybody in the executive team plus these two people are VIPs. Anytime these have a bad experience anywhere for any reason, the network was bad, or they couldn't get audio running or anything like that, we have a ton of telemetry, and we use that telemetry to inform you so that, if you're the IT admin and the VP of sales just had a terrible call, you have an email from us before he walks down the hallway to say he had a bad call. It was because this router in this room has 10% packet loss. You probably need to go look at that cable or that router and see what's going on, because this is not normal. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to do. We're trying to make our IT people look like superheroes, because they are, and they shouldn't be dealing with this stuff. And when things go wrong, at least you have the answer and you have next steps for how to go fix it so it doesn't happen again. So this goes back to the same point, which is we have what we call proactive support. We have humans instead of phone trees. If you try to get support at Highfive, you get people on the line within 30 seconds. If you want to do video, we can do that. We do a lot of our support through video, and that actually helps a lot, even though you'd think it's not that big of a deal. It establishes that connection and communication between the person that is frustrated and the person trying to help. And of course, you get screen sharing, you get all these other advantages implicitly through that. But equally important is we use telemetry on the back end, so that when you come to us, we kind of already know what went wrong. Like, we don't ask you, can you try restarting it? Or, have you tried, doing these standard, we don't lead you through this phone tree of a script that says, you need to do these things, and then we can start looking at the problem. Because we have all the data on our side. We know what's going on. We know all these things are working. This thing is not working. So when you call into us, we generally have a pretty good idea about what's happening. And we have between 98 and 99% customer sat for our support, which is unbelievable, right? Everybody that contacts us, our biggest problem is when people have a bad experience and they don't talk to us, because then we can't do anything. But if they contact us, we find a way to do that. And we also have our support team in-house. They're sitting right next to the engineers, so if something goes wrong, they poke them and say, hey, what's this about? I haven't seen this before. So, and that means that is one of the things that leads to this 98% CSAT, which is we solve it every time there is a problem. So this is my rant. So this entire industry, again, I'm talking about video conferencing, but I'm sure you have equivalents in your fields. Everybody's so concerned with the technology, right? Everybody's, in our industry, interop is a big thing. Can I hook this Highfive unit up to a WebEx unit? Can I join a Zoom call from this thing? Which, that's important. That has been the industry's focus for the past 25 years, and it still isn't working. So to me, I'm like, cool, we tick the box, we move on, but that is not fundamentally solving the problem of connecting to people that need to talk to each other. And the same with codecs and AI transcriptions and all these. Everybody's trying to find the next big thing, when the next big thing is just making the basics work, because we're still not there. And again, this is the reason why we get all these funny jokes in movies and TV series, because we still haven't delivered on this. So this is my plea for the industry and for most industries, right? Get the basics right, because most of them are not there yet. And until we have close to 100% success rate getting into the call, having flawless quality in the calls, we can't do the whole AI. Will the future of video conferencing be VR? No, it will not. Nobody's going to put on a helmet to be in a video conference. So this is just a wider point to my industry, but it applies to most of the enterprise stuff, which is we tend to be very, very seduced by new things, as opposed to going back and doing another iteration on a thing that's almost there. So this is my plea to the industry. I like where we're going with this. In general, I would say we're so much better off than 5 to 7 years ago, but there is so much more to do. And I'm actually very curious what kind of frustrations you have with video conferencing, so definitely talk to me if you have any, or are evaluating video conferencing, or you have an existing one that fails you in some way. I promise I won't sell you on it. I'm not in sales, but I find it fascinating. I'm in product. I want to hear how people use things. And the same for other enterprise software, because we work with and integrate with a lot of this enterprise software stuff. So we need to know what's failing in other areas that we can go fix on behalf of the industry. So I wanted this talk to be short. It's a little bit of a scattered thing all over the place. I do want to give you the chance to ask questions if you have any. And I also want to tell you that we have a partnership with Okta for this upcoming period, where if you sign up for Highfive, you get to use it for unlimited for 1 year for free. So you will have essentially web conferencing. You have a thing that can replace most of the web conferencing stuff out there without any downloads. It just opens up in the browser. And if you go to highfive.com/offers/Okta, or I think there should be like a piece of paper in front of you that has the same thing, that gives you a more detailed overview of Highfive. And I'm also happy to talk to you about any of this stuff. So, any questions? I know it's not like the easiest thing. It's a very open-ended talk. So if you have, questions?
How are you guys pushing down updates to the, How are you guys pushing down updates to the camera and the audio
hardware
itself? Yeah.
That's a good question. It's actually the same way. So we use the Chrome auto updater that runs on all of our devices. So we update overnight. We time it so it's like 2 a.m. and wherever you are. And we update all of the conference phones, the cameras, everything. So that is always running the latest version. So if you go talk to our customers that bought Highfive 2 years ago, still have the same hardware, and they're like, holy shit, sorry, I swear a lot, I'm Scandinavian. The thing that I bought 2 years ago has become so much better, and I didn't have to do anything. And we update every 2 weeks. And again, we take care of security, updates, all that stuff. And we have a very secure platform purpose-built for this. It's not running like Mac OS or Windows. It's running a super locked-down Linux distribution that we have full control over, signed in all sorts of ways to make sure that can never be tampered with.
Cool. So follow-up to that question is, I've worked at a lot of places that usually they don't really embrace video conferencing. It's just,
what's that?
I've worked at a lot of places that don't really embrace video conferencing. I know it's like, it's either your business does it or your business doesn't. I find more often than not that people hate staring at each other, so we usually go straight to the audio. Do you find that the bulk of your customers are using just the audio features or just the video features, or how are you breaking that up as a business?
Yeah, so that's actually one of our main challenges as a company is culture change, right? So the younger the company is, the younger the employees they have, the more used to they are to being on video. Like, your sons or daughters are probably on Snapchat right now. But people that have been in this industry for a long time and that have done all their interactions through a conference phone bridge, they have a little bit of trouble, getting into that mindset. We do as best as we can to kind of bridge this over. We're not like forcing you to use video or anything. We just say, even if you don't want to use video, having that wideband Dolby audio is going to make night and day difference for every single call you're in. You can hear everybody, you sound good to everybody. Even if you just want to use it as a phone, you're still going to get a phone that is literally 3 times as capable in terms of audio quality as a normal phone call is. So the question is, do we have customers that are worried that we're eavesdropping on their conferences? That would be very bad for us. So the way I generally say this, we have no incentive to do that. And we even have like a philosophy I talked about, we don't want to store passwords. Like, we don't want any personal information. You give us money, we give you the service. We're not trying to like mine or do anything with your data or your information or your calls. We don't store anything unless you ask us to record the meeting and put it on a server so you can get it later. And generally, this is not a problem. I think people are mostly beyond that level where they think that having a local thing that sits inside your 4 walls at work makes anything more secure than a cloud-based solution built by people that know how cloud works. So overall, I would say very rare. It definitely happens with companies that have like huge investments in, let's say, Cisco hardware. They have like, 50 cameras that they bought from Tandberg in 2002 or whatever, and they want to use that system, and they don't understand how this cloud thing can go. One of the best things that happened to us is actually this upcoming Zoom IPO, because Zoom has proven that that market is actually trusting enough to go full cloud, and that's very encouraging for our entire industry. So Cisco better wake up. So he's asking, we have conference rooms that have other AV equipment and Crestron interfaces and stuff like that. So The answer is kind of complicated, or rather, the answer is actually very easy. So for AV equipment, everything now is USB-based. So we actually run our own OS, and you can just plug in USB-capable devices. Both cameras and microphones and speakers have been standard in USB since the standard was launched. So that's not a problem. I'm not talking, there's a separate category here, which is like if you buy a Cisco camera and it's a SIP camera or some standalone thing that needs to be hooked up to some sort of thing under the table. Those cameras are not what I'm talking about here. That's interrupt support, which we have. Again, it doesn't really solve the problem, but it can be used with Highfive. But the best thing to do right now, and you see this happening, Logitech, Polycom, Yamaha, you name it. Like everybody that makes hardware for microphones, speakers, and cameras are just full in on the USB train there. So we sit in the middle, we make sure the user experience, the updates, everything is taken care of. And then it's not bring your own hardware, it's bring your own microphone, speaker, and camera, right? That's really what you want. You want a room like this to be able to have a setup with lapel mics and a camera that points in here, and you plug all that into a Highfive box over there with USB, and then it all works. So yeah, it is modular in that sense. For Crestron, this is my personal opinion. Don't take this as Highfive's opinion. I think Crestron does a lot more harm than they do good. Like they are, and you even called it that kind of junk, but fundamentally, we can make a much better UI in the room than Crestron can. We are, and I know how arrogant that sounds, but we get usability. We have touch screens in every room with this Dolby phone. We can integrate things into the Dolby phone that control other aspects of the room. And we think we can do that a lot better than a company like Crestron, which is generally not the most forward-looking of companies as far as usability goes. So he's asking, how large of an audience can you support through this? So there's a couple of levels, and some of I'll highlight the things that are coming very soon. So the things we have right now, in one conference, you can have 125 participants right now. That's the baseline kind of average meeting capability. We are building in some tools. So the number of participants is actually less challenging than how do you manage a meeting that has that many people in it, right? So what we're doing right now, we're building a good UI to manage a meeting of that size. And then in parallel, we are adding support for live streaming and stuff like that. So if you have something like an Apple keynote or a product announcement or something like that, you want to be live, but you're expecting thousands of people to show up, we support that. We just stream that through AWS, and we scale as far as Amazon goes. So those are the things that we're doing in that area. And then in the future, we're going to build things like webinars on top of that. So we can support quite a number of users right now, up to 125 in one call. If you need more than that, you probably start thinking about live streaming and more like a broadcast kind of case. And that's also coming probably next quarter. So, other questions? Anybody here worked in design or usability? No? Okay. Anything else? Come up, talk to me. Thank you for bearing with me. I know this is not a traditional talk, but hopefully you had fun.